Hi, I'm Chad with Move for a Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the whole tone scale. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 6.15 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So we've talked about a lot of different scales in this section, and I'm going to talk about one more scale. And this scale is unique like the diminished scale. It has unique qualities like the diminished scale, but it's different than the diminished scale. So it's not like the major scale or its modes, and it's not like the harmonic minor scale or its modes, or the melodic minor scale and its modes. And I'm sure you can figure out by the name, if you've come through these lessons, how this scale is built. And it's built by whole tones, so everything is a whole step or a whole tone. So if you start on the root, you go up a whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then one more whole step and you're back to the root an octave higher. So like the diminished scales, it's a symmetrical scale where you're just going in a symmetrical fashion, but it's more symmetrical than the diminished scales because the diminished scales were either starting with a whole step and then a half step, or a half step and then a whole step, and then repeating those symmetrically. This is just all whole steps, so that's all you do. It's just whole steps up and down the whole fretboard. And you can also see that it's less notes than the major scale or the melodic minor scale or the harmonic minor scale. Those are all made of 7 notes, and this is less notes than those. The diminished scale was made of 8 notes, so it actually had more notes. The whole tone scale is actually 6 notes, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because of this, the keys work differently, which I'll talk about coming up in the next lesson. Just like with diminished scales, they still have the same amount of keys because you still have the chromatic scale, so there's 12 notes. Start the scale on each of those notes, you'd have each of the keys. But like the diminished scale, a lot of those keys share the exact same notes. So if you're playing one scale, you're playing actually multiple scales at the same time. And as you can see, the intervals are root 2, 3, sharp 4, sharp 5, flat 7. And since it's not 7 notes, you can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're actually leaving out one of the numbers. And instead of the sharp 4, you can consider it a flat 5. That's a common way to view the intervals of the whole tone scale, because the flat 5 and the sharp 5 are really what distinguish this scale. But when you're writing it out, typically you would go sharp 4 and then sharp 5. And I'm sure you can see that if you build a triad, you would get a root 3, sharp 5, and that's an augmented triad. So this is shown in G, so that'd be G augmented. Building 7th chords is different. It's not like building a normal 7th chord. And what you can do is consider the 7th chords either a G7 sharp 5 or G7 flat 5. And really they don't have a perfect fit in them. So it's a root, a 3, a flat 7, and then either a flat 5 or a sharp 5. So you don't skip in thirds like you do with a lot of the other scales. It's more like the diminished scale with the half-whole diminished scale or the altered scale, where it's a little different. You have to think about it differently. So a lot of times when you see like a G7 sharp 5 on a chart, it's a lot of times talking about whole tone scale harmony, or a G7 flat 5. So it's like the altered scale or the other scales that produce altered tones, where you have a dominant chord and then either a sharp 5, flat 5, sharp 9, flat 9. Those are your altered tones. But the whole tone scale only has a flat 5 and a sharp 5, and it doesn't have a perfect fit in it. So this could be used over a 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord that's acting as a 5 chord going back to the 1. You could use this instead of the altered scale or one of the other scales that produces altered tones. So if we were to take this and put it over the whole fretboard, this is in the key of G, you can see it's a very symmetrical scale because everything shifts in whole steps. No matter where you look, every interval is going to be a whole step apart. And because it's such a symmetrical scale, and because of the intervals it produces, it's a really hard scale to make sound really good. So if you use it a lot, it's going to start sounding boring usually. You're going to hear the same tones coming out. It's really hard to make it sound unique and interesting if you use it for a long period in a song. So a lot of times you just use it for a short phrase and then go out of it. But it's not the only way you can use it. Some people use it a lot. And it just takes a lot of practice to really make it sound good and not just sound like you're playing the same thing over and over again, since it's so symmetrical. And one cool thing about the scale, which is also a thing that makes it sound the same if you do it over and over again, is you can take any little cell in here. So if I'm just taking random notes. If I went sharp 5, 3, flat 7 and played those as single notes if I was soloing, I could just continue that little pattern. You can see I just picked a little triangle pattern that was going like this. I could just do it over and over again up the fretboard. I could do it really quickly, just moving in whole steps. So that's something that's done with the scale a lot. You take a little cell of some sort and you can play it in whole steps up the fretboard really quickly. And I'll show you how to do that with chords in the next lesson. So here's a pattern that's common for the whole tone scale. It's actually a really easy pattern to play. You would just play 3 notes, then 2 notes, then 3 notes, and then a group of 2 notes for the next 2 strings because of the way the guitar's tuned, and then 3 more notes. So it's a really easy pattern to memorize and use pretty quickly. And because of the way this scale is, since it's just whole steps, this is the only scale pattern you really have to know. Obviously you can create other scale patterns, but the diminished scale patterns, they had 2 that you would use over and over again. The whole tone scale just has 1 that you can repeat over and over again, and that would just connect everything up and down the fretboard. As you could see, what I had drawn was this right here. I would just take that again and start on the next note and play the exact same thing, and I would have the exact same pattern, just obviously different intervals compared to my root. But I just repeat that pattern over and over and it would connect all the way up the fretboard. So if you look at the patterns broken out, 6 patterns, since there's 6 notes in this scale, they would all look the exact same. Obviously you're just moving up the fretboard, so you're a different place on the fretboard, and the interval names change compared to the root, but the actual shape of the pattern stays the same. And another thing you can do, like with the diminished scales, is to play it more horizontally and just play one big pattern up, and that's a way you can play it really fast and gain a lot of length on your fretboard, and that would be to play 3 notes per string. And if you played 3 notes per string, you could end up with a pattern like this. And it's super symmetrical. It's just 3 notes per string. The only reason it changes at all is because of your B string and the way it's tuned, so you have to move up half a fret or half a step and then just repeat it again. I just added 1 more note to end back at the root. So that's a really common thing, to play 3 notes per string. And then I'll just touch on this in this lesson instead of doing a whole nother lesson for it. Like the diminished scales, if you're playing in one key, you're actually playing in multiple keys at once. So even though there's really 12 keys because there's 12 notes in music, if I was to play a G whole tone scale, which is what's on your screen, I can make any one of those notes the root. So if I started on G, made that my root, I'm playing G whole tone. But if I started on A and that was my root, I'd be playing A whole tone. So if you're playing G whole tone scale, you're actually playing the same notes for A whole tone scale, B, D flat, E flat, and F whole tone scales as well. So those notes together make up all of those scales. And the other interesting thing about the whole tone scale, the diminished scale did the same thing, but there were more that you would end up with more scales. The whole tone scale, you only have 2. So starting on G would give you the G, A, B, D flat, E flat, F whole tone scales, but starting on A flat, you would either have A flat, B flat, C, D, E, or F sharp whole tone scales. So those are the 2 groupings of scales that all share the same notes. And it's just any note from the scale can be the root of the scale. So although it's symmetrical like the diminished scale, it's more symmetrical than the diminished scale. Since the diminished scale had different intervals in it, the whole tone scale obviously just has whole tones, whole steps, so that's why it only creates these 2 groups of scales that have the exact same notes. So that's the whole tone scale. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about harmonizing the whole tone scale. And be sure to download the e-guide. All the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.